Welcome to the Coach Barnabas podcast. It's time to take a few minutes and leave behind the stuff that drains us and recharge our batteries with some encouragement and insight. Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Coach Barnabas. This is the 7th episode. So I'm really glad you're here. It's great to have you back. Also, thank you once again to Nigel, my disembodied British voice of sophistication, for introducing the show. Good to have you back. It's been a little while since I've recorded an episode. Just a lot happening, and to be honest with you, been dealing with maybe a little disappointment in my life. Nothing big, but you know, it's life, and sometimes life just doesn't always work out neatly. And as I used to do when I had a written blog, is sometimes I call it self-medicating. Sometimes just kind of work through whatever I'm going through in real time, and put it out there and just say, this is what I'm learning from it. And sometimes I thought I was just writing something, almost like a journal or a diary, thinking I just need to kind of cleanse myself of whatever it is that's on my mind. And journaling can be really good for that, and just kind of getting it out. But a lot of times when I found myself sharing things in the blog, I'd get a private message from people, or comments from people saying I needed that. And it was kind of one of those cathartic moments, or aha moments, where you realize that whatever it is you're going through, you may think you're going through it alone, but unbeknownst to you, there are people all over the place going through the same thing or needing the same kind of thing. And so I just found, like, maybe sometimes it may sound simple, but I'm just going to kind of just share, my thoughts on something, or my process in working through things. And maybe you just needed that little word of encouragement, like, yeah, you know what? I need to do that too. Or I just needed that today. So, and maybe not. Maybe this is, or duh. Or, maybe it's not something you're facing now, but you've been there, and maybe you'll be there. And, well, chances are you'll be there again, because life is cyclical. And, you might be enjoying a nice stretch of life where the waters are smooth and everything is, unicorns and rainbows, as they say. But eventually, life's going to get messy again. But anyway, I've just been dealing with disappointment. And there have been a few things, maybe a couple things in particular, where I've devoted a lot of time and energy into things. One of which, you may have noticed behind me, I've got some gear here in my office / studio / stepson's abandoned bedroom since he moved out. But for those of you watching on the YouTube, that is, if you're listening elsewhere, just trust me. I've slowly kind of taken over the room a little bit. And so I have some 49ers gear behind me, some San Francisco Giants gear, because I am a native Northern Californian, and my loyalty is to my local professional sports teams like the 49ers and the Giants. As you may be aware, the 49ers came up short in the Super Bowl, and that was very disappointing in the big picture of life. Whoop-de-doo. But you're thinking of, from the moment they lost their last game last year, you start thinking ahead to the coming year, and you start investing hope in it, thinking next year's their year. And from July on, you're thinking about it, and they have some great success. You get your hopes up, and then you're into February, and it all crashes down, and it ends just that suddenly. It's over. And, there's some other things where it's like I invested a similar amount of hope and expectation and attention and passion, so to speak, where I had to face certain disappointment when things didn't go the way I wanted them to. And those are, the things that I'm talking about, that's all they are. They're disappointments. They're really nothing more, just things that you invest your hope in. You invest some emotional time and energy into it, and it doesn't go the way you want. Certainly that's different than, mourning the loss of loved ones, or whatever the case may be. There's certain things that transcend disappointment and go into outright mourning, or I don't know, more traumatic type situations. So I'm not really talking about that. I'm just talking about, how do you deal with disappointment? How do you deal with how do you process things that you put a lot of time and effort into, and despite your best efforts, the results aren't the way you want them to be? Do you consider yourself a failure? Do you beat yourself up? Do you think, do you go through the woulda, shoulda, couldas and, wallow in it? Do you spend a lot of energy, beating yourself up over it? Or do you do your best to kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off, learn from it, and move forward? And honestly, I can't say I'm always good at this, but I'm finding myself trying to do that second part. Taking my eyes off certain disappointments, things that, and again, it's football. Okay. I'm not really talking about that too much, but sometimes something as simple as that, that kind of comes on the heels of other disappointments. Then you start feeling like you're just being kicked while you're down. And when those things happen, then things kind of snowball in your emotions. You start really believing negative things, and you start thinking, man, I just can't catch a break. I'm just destined to lose everything I want, or everything, and it's just this negative momentum happens, and you just start thinking you're doomed, and then you just stop trying, right? And I guess, that's what I want to kind of process in my own life, and maybe by sharing this, you might identify with it in some way and say, you know what, I want to be careful not to go there myself. So where I am with things is, as it turned out, and as you may know, for those of you who know me, you already know this. For those of you who might be stumbling across this by happenstance, my name's Corey. Nice to meet you. But I live in Rhode Island. I'm a native of California, as I mentioned, a native Northern Californianer. Californian is really the way it is. And so that's, I came from a more mild climate. Here it's mid-February in New England, and we got, about a foot of snow yesterday. And so on top of certain disappointments from the weekend, I also had to begrudgingly go out and shovel snow last night, which is my anti-passion. It just sucks the life out of me. I hate it. But it's a fact of life here. It's a necessity of life. So that kind of, in a way, processing the disappointment of a lost Super Bowl, my thoughts turned quickly to, well, heck, now there's a stupid snowstorm coming, and I have to deal with that. And in a way, that channeled some of my emotional energy from wallowing in self-pity of losing, really, in the big picture of life, something that's fun, but not much different than that. Sports are fun. Unless you're, it's your team and that's your livelihood or something else, that's different. But just as a spectator, it's fun to have your team win it all, and all that kind of stuff. But really beyond that, it's not life or death. So putting things in perspective in their proper place in life is important. And then channeling my mind into, okay, now I have the joy, he said sarcastically, of dealing with, a lot of snow and shoveling. And then, if you've lived in the East or in a snowbound area, the joy that is when the plows clear the roads and they push all this, ice cold bricks, cement like icy crud in front of your driveway that you have to shovel out to get your car out of there. That stuff weighs a ton. I mean, all this stuff, it's no fun. But somehow, in a way, it took my mind off of crying about the football game. And so there's that perspective. It's like, okay, what's next? What do I have to deal with next? And so sometimes that helps kind of put things in perspective. But also, and I think more constructively, is taking inventory, recounting the blessings and the good things that are in your life. And honestly, as I record this, it's Valentine's Day. And so today is a great day to take inventory of the blessing that is my wife, my marriage, And I kind of have discussed this in previous episodes as far as the road I took to find her. And I'll go into more detail again. I tease this, but at some point when I feel it's appropriate or something, I'll go into more detail about our story and the path we took to get to where we are. Because I love her story, and I think it's powerful. I think it's pretty cool. But it was a long and winding road, to quote the Beatles here for a moment. But to get to where we are. So when I think back on the blessings that I experienced in my life every single day, I don't want to take them for granted. And sometimes when we face disappointments or things don't turn out the way we want to, we tend to focus on those and wallow in it, and forget the road we took to get to where we are and the things we enjoy. Keeping things in perspective as far as where I live. Yeah, I complain about the snow, but there's a lot of other parts in the world I could be living where they don't have electricity, or they don't have things that I take for granted. I have heat, and there are certain I'm thinking I'm kind of winging this, or I'm kind of improving this thing. I don't script these things out. But I think back to 1986. I went to China for a couple of weeks and spent some time in Hong Kong, which is beautiful and pretty amazing. But we also went into mainland China, and we were in this little village, and it was like going back in time. It's the best way to describe it. I remember standing in the middle of this little village and seeing an elderly man. I have no idea how old he was. He was probably not even 5 feet tall, maybe 5 feet tall. Little old guy with a bamboo stick across his back with two buckets on a bucket on each end, going out to the middle of town to the well, which was a pump. Again, it's like going back in time. And he stick the bucket under the spout of the well, pump it to get water. And he fills up both buckets, puts them back on the end of his bamboo stick, and walks away. And I don't know the purpose of the water, but the fact that I could just go into the other room and turn the little handle and have hot or cold water just pour right out at my convenience. These are things that we don't think about, that, in other parts of the world to this day, people don't have that. So it's things like that where I just kind of am reminded of the everyday blessings and conveniences that I have, that I just need to remember and take inventory and be thankful for them. And it does have a tendency to put whatever disappointments you're going through, whether big or small, whether they're temporary, whether it's a one and done, or there's a wait till next year, whatever the case is, it kind of puts those things in perspective. But I also think we can learn from things. If there's disappointments in our life, I learned this a long time ago. Disappointment doesn't necessarily mean failure. Okay. And if you know the old Thomas Edison quote about how many times it took him to finally get the proper settings and the proper conditioning to have a light bulb work the way he wanted it to. In the saying says that there's like 10,000, took him 10,000 tries to finally get everything just right to where the light bulb would be, and it worked perfectly. And you could say he failed 9,999 times, or he just found 9,999 ways not to do it. Whatever your perspective, it's just a matter of saying, I'm not going to be defined by disappointment. I'm not going to give up after 9,000 times. I'm going to keep trying till I get it right. And that's kind of, to use sports, go back to a sports metaphor, it's like, next season, like it or not, is coming. And so we can either learn from it and build on what we achieved this year, learn from our mistakes, where we came up short, and improve upon it. So maybe this time next year, we're the ones celebrating. But in life is to kind of do the same thing, is to assess and apply things that we learned and do better next time. And so that's kind of where I am. And maybe you take something from this and say, yeah, I need to learn to apply that. Or, this guy is kind of an idiot. He doesn't already know that. But, it doesn't matter how smart you are. When you're dealing with it, sometimes you forget your own advice. And you just don't deal with it well. And, sometimes we just need to step back, think about it, and pull ourselves up and do it right. So I hope in some way that this has maybe encouraged you or helped you kind of see things and again, put them in their proper perspective and move forward. Don't dwell in it. As another saying goes, is you don't drown from falling in water, you drown by staying there. It's the same thing with maybe self-pity, self-doubt, beating yourself up. You spend a lot of energy and you've gotten nowhere. So the important thing is to get up, get out of that puddle of your own making or just by circumstances, despite your best efforts, and move forward, move on, and become better because of it. So that's my word of encouragement to you. So I hope you get something out of it. Hopefully I did too, because I'm honestly speaking to myself maybe more than I'm even speaking to an audience right now. So with that, I just ask you again, I want to just remind you to be encouraged and be an encouragement. We'll catch you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you for joining the Coach Barnabas podcast. We'd greatly appreciate your support by liking and subscribing to the podcast and setting up notifications so we can let you know when new episodes are available. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment. Make a difference today.